Chapter 4 of Psychopomp Drive. Written by Janeen Leese-Taylor. Read aloud by SkyAsimaru. Chapter 4 Hollow Souls. The polite, glasses-wearing spirit of Reichardt Griffith was the first to extend a hand. The dark-haired Frenchman wearing the kind of smile that was sad around the edges.
I am sure that a welcome is the last thing you feel that you need right now,
he said sympathetically, his accent smooth and warm like a lit cigar.
But regardless, it is nice to see a new face.
He had intelligent eyes and sharp features. In life, Finley imagined that he must have been a businessman of some kind, an accountant or someone who handled stocks and trades. He felt his own eyes being pulled toward the sharp, crisp edges of his dark suit and the perfectly smooth black shirt beneath it. The man cut an impressive silhouette. The figure of a teenage boy appeared next to them, without so much as a sound. Wafer-thin and as pale as a ghost, he moved across the room with a kind of spectral grace that made Finley jump when he appeared beside him on the sofa. He offered Finley something resembling a shy smile.
The body you're in right now is not your own,
he stated. His voice was like a whistling breeze, reedy and barely there.
I understand that all too well. This one is new. It feels strange, hard to get used to.
Finley furrowed his brow.
What do you mean?
He replied quietly.
What spectre means is your resurrected spirit is contained inside a soul case,
Reichardt supplied. He eyed the boy next to them as he hovered awkwardly by Finley's left shoulder.
It is how we can exist in the in-between, without our human bodies. The locals call them dolls. They're made right here in the underground.
And you have my magic to thank for the new additions, Salo added playfully. He leaned closer to Reichardt's arm, and the man raised his free hand, tracing it along the black velvet of his fur affectionately, until he reached the animal's ears, which he tugged on gently.
All Amarini will develop cat-like ears and a tail over time. It's just part of having one of a cat spirit's 9 lives, I suppose.
Finley glanced back in the space behind the taller man, taking note of the extra appendage.
Handy,
he remarked.
Exceedingly,
Reichardt agreed. The Grim turned to face back into the open room again, raising his voice as he called out.
Estates, could I perhaps borrow you for a moment or two?
Finley hadn't even noticed the other man in the armchair. He was much older than the others, perhaps in his mid-50s or 60s. If he had still been alive, he looked like he might have been a builder or some other workman, judging by his broad shoulders and wide biceps. His salt and pepper hair was messy and combed back to cover the spots where it was thinning. His choice of facial hair more than made up for it, however, covering the man's face with thick gray hair like a domestic garden grown wild. He had the thick, stubby fingers of a man who had years of experience in his craft, the nails worn down to little more than thin lines splitting the skin. He drummed his fingertips on the arms of the chair, hazel eyes glancing upwards when he was acknowledged. He nodded wordlessly and let out a gentle groan as he peeled himself from the upholstery where he had made his home.
What do you need, Sallow? He questioned.
Could you take Finley to the holding room for me? Introduce him to a few of the specimens, the cat asked. Specimens, Finley repeated, watching as the ghostly youth stepped towards the older man, blocking his way with outstretched hands. His white ponytail bobbed high on the back of his head, the shaved insides showing off high cheekbones and wary blue eyes.
Make sure to bolt the door,
he implored in a tone that suggested fearfulness.
The hollows don't like to come out into the light. The in-between hurts their eyes.
States tipped his head back slightly, narrowing his eyes in the other man's direction as he shooed him away with a large hand.
What have I told you about that, Specs? You're gonna creep out the new guy. They were once people too,
Spectre answered back stubbornly, his blue eyes emitting a purplish glow.
Their thoughts persist.
What's a hollow? Finley asked. Spectre twisted on the spot.
They are the remnants of people that couldn't be saved, he answered cryptically. Taken by the virus, they became an illness too.
I don't understand. What do you mean? Finley pressed.
It's easy if we just show you,
States said, patting him on the shoulder as he passed him.
Come on, hop to it, kiddo.
The other Amarini watched him go, exchanging a series of pointed looks. Whatever it was that he was going to see, it made the rest of the group uneasy. States and Reichart walked in front of him with a slow, even pace, leading him through the rest of the building. To a casual observer, the house resembled any other domestic dwelling. The walls were painted crisp, fresh white, lined with ornamental reminders of times Finley had no connection to. The furniture was clean and well kept, suggesting that the residents took care of what little they shared. The photos on the walls and shelves they passed were of the people in the other room, images of them in their past lives, smiling and happy. Their deaths, like most others, came as something awful and unexpected. Just like him, they hadn't been ready. Reichart followed the path of his eyes and let out a quiet sigh.
Memory pages,
he said, and nodded in the direction of the photographs.
We have a special lab downstairs to develop the images. It works in a way that is similar to a photographer's darkroom. The water is brought up from the Lethe. It can pull pictures from your mind.
Finley's eyes widened.
These pictures are from your memories?
He asked. The tall man sighed again. There was a sadness to the sound, a heavy weariness that he carried in the way that he walked as well.
As time passes, a visual memory fades. It is best to capture the images of your loved ones now.
The "before you forget them" remained unsaid, but Finley still heard it loud and clear. Within the confines of Finley's chest, something squeezed and tightened. The air escaped from his mouth like a deflated balloon.
I will, he said.
He watched States back as he walked, the American peeling open the door next to them and leading them down a set of stairs into a basement. The way was half lit before them, and Finley followed the other spirits blindly as they advanced, watching as the dim orange lights overhead made State's bald head shine.
The things that Spectre mentioned." The blond man started, not sure how much was appropriate to ask. "Those hollow things? What are they really?" "They are what we have been brought back to fight against," Reichardt answered coolly.
Finley staggered as the stairs came to an abrupt end, and the man to his right reached out an arm to steady him. Light flickered to life in their peripheries as States switched on a basic plastic flashlight and stepped towards the final door. He knocked on the metal with his knuckles, and the dull surface groaned in the silence of the basement. The bulkhead was crafted with an imposing vertical sheet of steel, a dog wheel in the center, sealing it and making it airtight, like the doors of a submarine. Along the edges, where it was joined to the walls of the house, thick metal bolts had been added to secure it. The muscular, bearded man extended the flashlight back towards him.
"Could you hold on to this for a second?"
he asked.
"Yeah, sure. No problem."
Finley accepted the tool tentatively and took a step back, allowing both men space to grasp the wheel and turn it. The metal whimpered and creaked as the wheel finally shifted from its original position, and Finley took another cautious step back despite himself. Cold air crept through the fringes of the door, ebbing and flowing around them like hands reaching out from the darkness. The light in his grip shook, and he reached up with his other hand to steady it, squeezing the plastic in an effort to hide the nerves that fluttered up through his veins. Reichardt stepped back as the inner workings of the house revealed themselves, and Finley passed him the light as he took his place behind the other men's shoulders again. Moving through the threshold was like stepping into a refrigeration unit, and Finley repressed a shiver as his breath whitened in the air and made the underside of his pinking nose wet with condensation. The torchlight bounced off the shelves, illuminating rows and rows of glass cylinders, which stretched from one end of the room to the other. Blank white dolls hung from the walls like disused shop mannequins. Lifeless, empty shells with the limpness of a hanging victim, the passing light making their limbs appear to twitch. Finley froze to the spot as something in the room made the hairs on his neck spring to life. The sound was like a low, intrusive buzzing, like hundreds of quiet voices were clamoring to be heard over each other. Whispers, like his own inner monologue, beckoned him from all sides. Promises of oblivion, peaceful nothingness, swirled beyond the fringes of what he could see in the dark. It was only then, when the glass jars all around him shuddered and vibrated, that Finley realized that their contents were alive. Black swirls of smoke twisted and jerked, moving like water within the confines of some of the solid containers. In others, masses of insects thrashed angrily, shrill voices crying out for blood and violence with a sort of blind and palpable rage.
"What are these things?"
His voice was quiet, as if the very words had been frightened back down his throat. Ahead of him, the tallest of the men swiveled on the spot, casting his yellow glow towards the whispering smoke-like masses ahead of him.
"These are some of the hollows that the other Grimms have brought in this week," he said. "They are here awaiting their exorcism."
Finley stepped closer to the jar in front of him. He knew that if he had been alive, his heart would have been pounding against his breastbone right about now. The hollow in front of him coiled in on itself, like a snake primed for explosive movement, the thin, inky tendrils of its form going from opaque to translucent before his eyes.
What exactly is it that you're exercising here?
He asked.
Hollows are sort of like a fungus, a living thing that infects the minds of lost souls. Like with any form of lower life forms, their goal is to multiply and to infect more people,
Reichart explained, shifting closer to point to some of the creatures contained on the shelves next to them.
These little things invade the minds of the living and the dead alike. They twist their souls into something new, something more like them. What you see before you is both the fungus itself as well as its victim. Over time, the infected souls will begin to lose their forms, becoming little more than a replica of their attacker. When we find an infected soul, what we refer to as a hollow, we exorcise it using a specially crafted weapons that only cause damage to the corrupted material and not the soul within it.
States seemed to materialize from the shadows next to them, and Finley jumped as his scruffy profile came into focus in the torchlight.
There are two types of hollows that we hunt.
He tapped on the glass with a fingertip, and the creature inside hissed and smashed against the other side of the glass, making its container rock violently.
These little fellows are called whisperers. I'm sure you can understand why if your own ears work worth a damn.
A whisperer crawls into your mind and takes the place of your inner monologue, that voice that serves as your internal decision-maker. It lies, creating doubt. They cause humans to harm themselves,
Reichart added.
Like the old Hada-Kitty rituals during the war,
States remarked, tapping the glass again as he studied the reaction of the creature inside.
Indeed,
Reichart muttered, wrinkling his nose like he found the description distasteful. The rays of the flashlight were now directed towards the humming black masses in the other jars. The illuminated containers began to bounce and rock, dangerously close to breaking free of whatever had been used to seal them to the metal shelving unit. Inside, tiny individual creatures spun wildly around and around the curve of the glass. Their sounds were less clear, like their voices were drowned out by their collection of opinions.
These are the other kind of hollow. They're called corruptors. Corruptors are the opposite to whisperers. They don't do subtle. These prime specimens gather in swarms and bring with them thoughts of anger, frustration, and violence. They twist grief and change it, making those under their influence lash out and harm others.
Hollows take advantage of existing emotions,
Reichart added.
Things such as grief or frustration cause a soul to become vulnerable to corruption.
The tall man's hands reached towards his back pocket, then pulled away again like an addict itching for a cigarette. He instead removed the glasses from the end of his nose and started to clean them with a small black piece of cloth that he produced from up his sleeve. Finley leaned in towards the specter in the glass cage.
It's hard to believe that this was once a person,
he remarked sadly. glancing back at the other spirits with him in the room.
If you exorcise them, does that mean they get to move on to the afterlife?
Rykard gave him a gentle smile as he placed the glasses back on his nose again.
Would you like for us to show you?
He turned and nodded towards the doorway.
Seal the exit, if you would, States.
States flexed his back with a groan and moved to close the door over, twisting the wheel until the last metal bar clicked into place. The temperature in the chamber began to fluctuate rapidly between burning hot and freezing cold, like being stuck between a heater and an air conditioner. An unnatural shiver made its way up Finley's spine and made him shudder audibly. Leaning forward, Rykard wrapped a hand around the jar by Finley's head, gently carrying it across the room. The being inside wailed and spiraled uncontrollably, threatening to break free of its clear prison. Unperturbed, the cat-eared Amarini reached for the wall, grasping a concealed handle and unfolding a long metal table out towards the center of the room. He placed the jar down onto its matte surface without a sound.
Oh, please keep the light steady, States,
the man instructed as he covered the lid of the jar with a hand and slowly began to twist. There was a noticeable pop when the suction was released, and Rykard took a few steps back, reaching into his coat to pull out something thin and glistening. The air immediately began to fill with sound, like a quiet voice was whispering at them from all directions. A vast feeling of loneliness washed over Finley as the hollow began to pull itself from within the confines of the jar, its cries weak like the sound of a dying animal.
So much! There's just so much! Make it stop! You can make it stop! Scared! So scared!
The tall Amarini before them moved as though he were dancing, the soles of his shoes sliding easily across the tiles as he seemed to entice the spirit to come closer. Between his left and right hands, a beautiful crimson ribbon caught the light, twisting and flowing like the motions of a great river. Finley watched in awe as the slender man shifted his weight from one side to the other, the black plume of smoke rising from out of the glass holder and joining him in the dance. The mass swirled around him, growing hands, eyes, and a mouth, and latching onto the Amarini's clothes, pulling at him as if trying to make him stop. A flicker of something sharp blurred in the lamplight, and the hollow let out a loud cry as Rykard cut into the mists, the ends of its long, vaporish tail beginning to glow where his weapons struck, as the man moved to a melody that only he could hear. The light began to travel up the creature's translucent body, engulfing it entirely in blue and purple flames. Rykard turned one last time, and then knelt before it, clutching his hidden weapons in both hands and bringing his palms together as if in prayer. In the space before him, barely visible in the low light, now stood the form of a little girl of no more than 5 or 6 years old. She was dressed in a pale pink nightie that almost reached her ankles. The ends of the light-colored fabric were dark with mud. There were scratches on her face, and blood slowly ran down from one ear, dripping across her clothes. Her tiny hands reached out for the man opposite her, closing around his much larger fingers. Reichardt opened his eyes as he stood, smiling as the small spirit's hands fell away from his own.
"Your parents are waiting for you, Emil," he said. "Just close your eyes and you'll be able to go to them now."
The child's round, wide eyes stared up at him, her plump cheeks rising as she grinned.
"Thank you, Mr. Kitty."
The voice didn't come from the spirit in front of them, but instead floated all around the room, like it was everywhere and nowhere all at once, disconnected from its owner. Reichardt let out an amused exhale through his nose, his feline ears wriggling on top of his dark hair.
"Dor, ma chérie," he replied. "I wish you the most beautiful eternity."
The little girl was waving as she vanished into the twinkling light, and Finley couldn't help but wave back, a feeling of overwhelming warmth and emotion washing over him. States slid a hand into the pocket of his jeans, hazel eyes sparkling with hues of brown and green as he came to stand next to him, offering Reichardt the torch with an outstretched hand. Bold traditional tattoos were etched into the tanned skin of both his arms, half hidden beneath the thick, dark body hair.
Every day we fight more of those things, and every day we help countless people make it to the other side.
Finley felt his eyes being drawn to the empty jar where it rested on the metal table across from them.
It must be hard, going up against something like that, when there are so many out there.
"That is precisely why we chose to remain behind in the in-between,"
Reichardt responded, wrapping his weapons once again in the bright material that joined them.
"To fight back against the growing threat that the Hollows represent. This way we can protect those we left behind in the world of the living."
His words made Finley think of Thorn, with her warm skin and bright eyes. He imagined her perched on the end of the sofa by lamplight, as her hand reached up to push her dyed pink fringe back from where it tickled her nose. Then he imagined her transformed by her loss, her smile condensed down to a hard, thin line, her teal eyes lacking their usual luster despite her best efforts. Grieving, vulnerable. He could remember her voice in his ears, louder than any of the whisperers could penetrate. The bell-like tones of her Welsh accent, the way she swore when something invoked her passion or her wrath. "This world is a wonderful and painful fucking place," she observed next to him, a quiet thoughtfulness overtaking her whole expression as she laid her copy of Frankenstein across her lap. Her eyes reflected the light through the parted curtains as she moved to bury her face in his sheets again, holding tightly to the last vestiges of sleep heat. The sweeping white linen made her skin glow as she located her favorite quote, isolating it within the brackets of her fingers. "Mary Shelley really hit the nail on the head here, Finn," she said. "Life, although it may only be an accumulation of anguish, is dear to me, and I will defend it." She sighed, running her hands over his atop the sheets. "The world is terrible, and the people are far from perfect, but they're all ours, Finn. They're the only people we've got. If push came to shove, I'd like to think that we would all sacrifice for the people around us. It's part of being human. His eyes traced the lines of the jars around them, falling on each of the writhing creatures in turn. Inside every container was a person that was hurt or in pain. They were people who had lost a loved one, who worked too hard, those who were sick and were still fighting on. Every one of them was a person like him, with someone like Thorn that loved them. For the first time since he had awoken in the in-between, Finley felt the familiar warmth of tears beginning to flow down his face. The quiet dripping of them, hitting the tiles under him, was like a discordant melody, a sad song played out of tune. He tried to swallow the feelings down, but there were just too many of them, and he felt himself sinking towards the floor under the watchful eyes of the other two spirits. Only one word came to mind to describe this feeling: heartbreak. To be continued in Chapter 5.